What's up, y'all? Part 2 of Daytime Crimes. My last video, I got it wrong. With the Junko case, I thought it was the same thing as the Hello Kitty case, and I was wrong. It was a completely different thing. Junko, sad as it is, she was poured cement into a oil canister, and then this other woman from China was put in a Hello Kitty doll. And that's the one we're going to be reacting to today. It's called the Hello Kitty Plush case. And this video is titled How Women Cross a Triad and Ended Up in a Hello Kitty Doll, Hong Kong's Darkest Era Explained, from Dark Asia with Megan. So, first of all, rest in peace to the woman this happened to. And make sure y'all have something to eat, something to drink. And let's go ahead and get into it.
In 1999, Hong Kong police entered a small apartment and made a discovery that would horrify the city. A woman's skull hidden inside a Hello Kitty mermaid doll. The victim was 23-year-old Fan Manyi, a nightclub hostess who had been held captive and tortured for over a month before she died. This is not just the story of a brutal crime. It is the story of a world Fan lived in, a world shaped by poverty, crime, and silence. And to understand how this could happen, we need to start with the Hong Kong of the late 1990s. Let's begin.
Wow.
The late 1990s were a turning point for Hong Kong. The city had just been handed back to China in 1997. On the surface, everything looked vibrant. New faces, new cultures, new energy. The population had grown to nearly 6 million, and the streets were packed. Neon lights spilled from karaoke bars and late-night restaurants, while shop fronts glittered with Japanese pop culture exports, music, fashion, food. But behind the glow, there was unease. The skyline promised hope, but the alleys below told a different story. In districts like Tsim Sha Tsui, the nights were crowded with tourists, businessmen, hustlers, and triad members. Money moved quickly. Cash, drugs, favors. Everyone knew someone who lived in the shadows. The nightlife industry thrived here. Clubs weren't just about drinks and music. They sold companionship, escape, and the illusion of luxury. But behind the polished smiles, the reality was harsh. Hostesses worked long hours for little pay, surviving off tips, always at risk of harassment, or worse, many owed debts they could never escape. And in Hong Kong, debts weren't settled in courtrooms. They were settled in alleys with intimidation, humiliation, and violence. A single insult to the wrong person could mean a punishment that stayed with you for life. This was the Hong Kong where Fan Manyi lived, a city full of opportunity and danger, where one wrong step could cost you everything.
People who live in big cities actually mad brave. It's not like, oh, this is super crime because it's the city. I know you gotta be careful and stuff, but every day is crazy. Some cities be dirty, bro.
Born in 1976 in Shenzhen, she was abandoned and raised in an orphanage in Matawai. There, the rules were clear. When you hit 15, you're out on the streets. No safety net, no exit plan. After leaving the orphanage, she lived on the edge, addicted to drugs, vulnerable, and without support. She turned to street prostitution, then worked in a brothel in Shamjuipo. Fan also resorted to one-woman brothels, where she worked alone, advertised discreetly, and often faced threats from underworld figures if she fell into debt or crossed the wrong person. And drugs weren't just present, they were part of the infrastructure. Crystal meth, ice, was the drug of choice. It fueled the nightlife, kept people alive, numbed them when they needed to forget. By the early 2000s, it would dominate treatment centers. But in the mid-90s, it was already spreading fast through karaoke rooms, hostess clubs, and cheap subdivided flats. Addiction clouded judgment, fed paranoia, and made cruel decisions feel ordinary. In neighborhoods like Shamshui-Po, it was easier to find a pipe than a way out. And then there was the sex trade. Technically, selling sex in private wasn't illegal, but almost everything around it, brothels, solicitation, management, was. So the workaround became the one-woman brothel. A tiny flat, one locked door, one phone. No staff, no backup. Just a woman alone with a stranger. It was extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
No witnesses, no protection, and no way out if the wrong man walked in. And Fan's path ran straight through those fault lines. In 1996, while working in Shamshui-Po, Fan met a man named Ng Qiyuan. He was one of her clients, older, streetwise, and like her, caught in the grip of Hong Kong's drug scene. Their relationship moved quickly, and within months, they were living as husband and wife. But what began as companionship soon turned into another trap. Both were addicted to methamphetamine, known locally as ice. The drug was cheap, easy to find in the nightlife districts, and it blurred the edges of reality. It also fueled tempers. Ng became violent, and arguments ended in bruises more often than in apologies. In November 1998, Fan...
She had a son? Sometimes I feel like addiction can hurt those surrounding the user more than the user themselves. Because, like, you're doing all this, like, you're aware, oh, it's my body, it's all this, it's it's only me. But then, like, all the people around you is suffering, too. And they never think about that.
gave birth to their son. Holding him in her arms, she decided she had to break the cycle. She left Ng, determined to quit the drugs and find safer work.
Good.
So she traded the brothel for a hostess job at a karaoke club. Still in the nightlife world, but with the hope that she could keep her distance from the dangers she had known. But the nightlife came with its own chains. Hostesses made low base pay and depended on tips and client commissions.
Makes me upset when I'm like, I know like the context of something and I'm watching it like here. Or like I'll be watching a movie, it's like you know the character dies or you'll watch something like live, like and you'll know the other team wins. And you're like, oh, I hope they could make a comeback, and then you're like, or I hope that you restart your life. And then you're like, you remember that it's like they passed away. Like that's just so messed up.
Rejection or debt could be deadly. In early 1999, Fan was accused, without proof, by a regular client named Chan Man Lok of stealing 4,000 Hong Kong dollars. She returned it immediately, but then he demanded 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, which was an impossible ask. And that's when her life took a devastating turn. To understand the danger Fan was in, you have to understand Wo, Hong Kong's oldest triad. Founded in 1930 in Shamshui-Po, Wo is Hong Kong's oldest triad society. By the 1990s, it had entrenched itself in bars, karaoke lounges, prostitution, drug trafficking, extortion, human trafficking, and even legitimate fronts like minibus routes and secondhand electronics. In districts like Tsim Sha Tsui and Mong Kok, where Fan lived and worked, Wo's influence was silent but pervasive. They didn't need to flaunt their power, they administered it. By the late 90s, after the handover, Wo had evolved. The showy street fights were less common. Instead, they embedded themselves deep into the infrastructure of nightclubs and karaoke lounges, turning them into hubs for meth, sex work, debt collection, and quiet deals. In their world, owing money wasn't just a balance to settle, it was leverage. And humiliating a man connected to the triads wasn't something you could fix with repayment. You had to pay back in face, and that price was always higher. Enforcement wasn't a public spectacle. It was quiet meetings in back rooms, sudden bursts of violence in an alley, and messages sent without words spoken. Turf disputes flared and vanished overnight, the point made and the order restored. apart. Even when bosses were arrested, the network never collapsed. It adapted, surviving through shifting crews and shared rituals, always plugged into whatever the city's night would buy. So basically, she wasn't being chased for 4,000 Hong Kong dollars. She had crossed into a system that ran on fear, debt,
more and more.
and public shaming. On March 17, 1999, that fear became real. Chan, two associates, and An Fong, a 14-year-old girl coerced into helping, snatched Fan from her home. So on that night of March 17th, Fan
Coerced at 14 to commit crimes like this.
Yi was at her flat in Lai Yu Estate, Kwai Chung. She lived in one of Hong Kong's public housing towers, a place where the walls were thin but where neighbors often kept to themselves. In a city where minding your own business could mean the difference between safety and danger, no one asked too many questions. That night, the door opened to 4 figures: Chan Man Lok, the man who accused her of theft, Leung Wai Lun, and Leung Xing Cho, his associates, and a teenage girl, Ah Fong, only 14, but already entangled in Chan's world. Fan didn't resist. The group took her to 31 Granville Road, a narrow, aging apartment block in Tsim Sha Tsui. And inside those walls, the nightmare began. At first, they beat her for hours at a time, demanding the 10,000 Hong Kong dollars Chan claimed she owed. When it became clear she couldn't pay, the violence turned into something else, something far more cruel. They spoke about pimping her out, selling her body for profit. Then they dismissed the idea. What's the fun in that? One of them said. Instead, they chose to make her suffering into a spectacle. For the next month, Fan was treated as less than human. They beat her with metal bars, kicked her dozens of times until she collapsed.
Is that blood on the
They raped her again and again, stripping away any shred of dignity. Her wounds were left untreated, sometimes smeared with spices, ground into her skin to heighten the agony. She was forced to eat things no human should. If she didn't smile, they punished her more. Torture became entertainment. They burned her legs and feet with melted plastic and hot wax so she couldn't walk, couldn't run. Food and water were inconsistent, sometimes withheld completely, other times replaced with filth. At first, she slept on a bed, then the floor. Eventually, they shut her inside a wooden wardrobe, crammed into darkness like an object stored away. The apartment was small, the air heavy with cigarette smoke and the smell of meth. Drug use wasn't just a habit here, it was a fuel for their sadism. Chan and the others smoked ice through the night, the high feeding their paranoia and brutality. Outside those walls, life in Tsim Sha Tsui went on. Neon lights flashing, taxis honking, people laughing over late-night noodles. Inside, the only sound was the steady rhythm of violence. Neighbors would later admit they heard screams. But in Hong Kong's crowded housing, people told themselves it was just another fight, and they stayed silent. For Fan, every day blurred into the next. There was no escape, no one coming to help. And with each passing night, the line between punishment and pure cruelty disappeared completely. By mid-April, Fan Manyi's body was failing. Weeks of beatings, burns, and starvation had left her too weak to stand for long. Her captors had stopped pretending the torture was about money. It had become entertainment, a nightly ritual fueled by drugs and dominance. Sometime between April 14th and April 15th, 1999, Fan died. Whether from head trauma, shock, or the cumulative toll of her injuries, no one knows for certain. What is certain is that no one tried to help her.
And then they go and say, "Oh, why are women so scared to go out?" And this is why, bro. No, nobody about to do nothing about that. She's too ugly. She's unable. It's like, that's so weird, bro. Like, this real. Like, I try to have my stuff, like, videos be like not too in depth. Like, try to be more family friendly. But this is like crazy, and this is real. Like, That's why women don't feel safe alone at night, bro. Cause who would like? How do you know that the person sitting next to you not a serial killer? You never know.
There was no panic, and, of course, no one called for an ambulance. For Chen and his associates, her death wasn't an end. It was a problem, a body in their apartment in the heart of Chim Sa Choi. And in
The body in the apartment. It didn't matter when you were burning, cutting, and putting paprika in her wounds. That didn't matter then. But no, now she's dead. So now I care. Oh no, what happened? There's a body on her hands, bro. Oh my
Hong Kong's
gosh.
underworld, disposal was about more than hiding evidence. It was about erasing someone entirely. They set to work dismembering her remains. The head was boiled,
Oh
stripping
my
into the
gosh.
skull. Other parts were discarded in the trash or flushed away. But it was what they did next that seared
Boiled.
itself into Hong Kong's collective memory. Fan's skull was stuffed inside a Hello Kitty mermaid doll. The same plush figure that might sit on a child's bed now
You can like see like the stuff. Is that oh, I think that's a wet spot too, like from blood or whatever. But like you can see the ash, like the cigarette, like the smokes and all the methane on there too, bro. And you can see the deterioration on the walls. That's insane, bro.
became a vessel for one of Hong Kong's most horrifying crimes. One of them even joked as he pushed the skull inside. "Be good and don't move. I'll help you dress up." Why a toy? Some believe it was mockery, a final humiliation. Others think it was convenience, a way to hide a skull in plain sight. Whatever the reason, the image of a smiling Hello Kitty concealing a human head became the haunting symbol of this crime. And still, outside on Granville Road, life went on. Tourists bargained for handbags, buses rumbled past, and no one knew that just meters away, a young woman had been erased from existence and hidden inside a child's toy. But the men had overlooked one thing. The weakest link in their circle wasn't the police, or the neighbors, or the landlord.
Is it that she was a mother? That's what
It
I'm
was
thinking
the
about.
14-year-old girl they had brought into their world. Her real name was never revealed publicly. In court, she was only known as Ah Feng. At 14, she should have been in school, worrying about exams or friends. Instead, she was living in a world run by drugs, money, and fear. Ah Feng had met Chan Man Lok months earlier. He was older, wealthier, and dangerous, a combination that can be intoxicating to a teenager with no stable home life. He gave her gifts, attention, and a place to belong. But what he really gave her was a front row seat to violence. During Fan Manye's captivity, Ah Feng was not just a witness. She admitted to participating, beating Fan at Chan's orders, laughing while she was humiliated. Sometimes she carried out acts so degrading they still make people shudder. Urinating on Fan's face, defecating into a shoebox that Fan was then
My
forced to consume.
gosh.
Whether Ah Feng did these things out of fear, loyalty, or a desperate need for approval, only she could say. But the cruelty she participated in would follow her long after she left that flat. When Fan died, Ah Feng stayed silent. Days passed, Chan and the others disposed of the body. Life in the flat returned to its grim normal. Meth smoke in the air, the sound of the TV.
I feel like they didn't notice her. I feel like she really could have just disappeared. I mean, she was 14. I don't know what she was supposed to do. Because they say by 15 you're out on the street. So we'll see what
in
happened.
the background,
What happened to her?
and the occasional knock from someone who knew better than to ask questions. But silence has a way of turning into nightmares. Within weeks, Ma Feng began to see Fan's face in her sleep, sometimes screaming, sometimes staring. She told police later that she could still smell the boiled flesh when she closed her eyes. In May 1999, unable to bear it any longer, she went to the police. At first, her story was so horrific that
Can't believe
officers
it.
thought she was making it up. But when she led them back to the apartment on Granville Road, the truth became impossible to deny.
That's
The
how it
skull and the Hello
looked.
Kitty
That's
doll
where they
was still
dismembered
there.
her.
Pots and pans lay scattered around, some still smeared with blood.
Whoa.
Outside, on the building's canopy, police found plastic bags stuffed with her remains. For weeks, police worked with what they had, running experiments to piece together who she had been. On June 3rd, 1999, her identity was finally confirmed through a photo overlay method at the Lockhart mortuary. The search for her killers began immediately. On May 27th, police arrested Chan Man-lok and his wife in Shekley Estate. The very next day, Leung Xing-cho turned himself in. But the youngest of the group, Leung Wai-lun, fled to mainland China. Months later, with the help of the Immigration Department and Chinese public security, he was tracked down and arrested in February 2000. The trial began in late 2000 at the High Court of Hong Kong. The defendants, Chan Man-lok, 34, a Washing Wo Triad member, Leung Xing-cho, 27, a restaurant worker, and Leung Wai-lun, 21, unemployed, faced charges of murder, illegal imprisonment, and preventing the lawful burial of a body. The prosecution laid out a timeline of abduction, a month of sadistic torture, death, and mutilation. Ah-fong took the stand, describing what she had seen and done inside that flat. Her testimony was so graphic, reporters later admitted they struggled to keep listening. But the defense fought back on one key point: intent. They argued that Fan's death wasn't premeditated, that she died not because they set out to kill her, but because weeks of abuse, fueled by drugs,
I thought it was
pushed
fun
her
to
body
torture
beyond
her.
its
That don't mean.
limits. They claimed it was manslaughter,
They don't
not
deserve it.
murder. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On December 7th, 2000, they delivered their verdict: guilty of manslaughter, not murder. All 3 men were sentenced to life in prison, eligible for
murder.
parole in about 20 years. The courtroom was silent, not with relief, but with disbelief. The judges ruled there wasn't enough forensic evidence to prove how Fan had died, only that she had endured abuse beyond imagination.
One of the people that was literally there said, this, and this happened. And they were like, nah.
The
Justice
outcome
systems
felt
everywhere
like
are
a second
messed, bro.
injustice. First, Fan had been failed in life. Now, she was failed in death. The public erupted in outrage. To ordinary Hong Kongers, the distinction between intent and outcome didn't matter. What those men did was murder, plain and simple. The law said otherwise. Fan's skull remained locked away as evidence for years. It wasn't until 2004,
left
almost
it in
5
there?
years later, that it was finally cremated. There was no funeral, no public memorial. The apartment at 31 Granville Road was left vacant for years. Locals avoided it, and rumors spread of noises at night, of a woman's shadow in the window. By 2012, the entire building was demolished. In its place now stands a boutique hotel, sleek and modern. Guests check in and out with no idea that they're sleeping just meters away from where one of the most horrific crimes in Hong Kong's history took place. It's been more than 25 years since Fan Man-yi's murder. The case has never really left Hong Kong's memory. Chan Man-lok and Leung Wai-lun remain behind bars. Life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 20 years, mean both could one day walk free. Leung Xing-cho's path was different. His sentence was reduced on appeal, and he was released on 2014.
What?
For a while, he disappeared from public view. But in 2022, his name returned to the headlines. This time, for the sexual assault of a 10-year-old girl. He was convicted and sent back to prison. The case inspired films like Human Pork Chop and There Is a Secret in My Soup, both released in 2001. And they sensationalized the violence.
Hope they got, consent from the family, because I know they made a movie, not just inspired by, but directly ripped from the Junko case. They completely copied it and made it into a movie. I hope that they got permission from the family, because if not, that's insanely disrespectful.
but rarely capture the quiet, systemic failures that led Fan into Chan's world in the first place. The poverty, the lack of social safety nets, and the control triads held over entire neighborhoods. Fan Manye's life was short, her death brutal, and her story distorted by headlines. But strip away the infamy, and you find a young woman who wanted something better for herself and her child in a city that failed to protect her. So, this case let us think once more about the people who slip through society's cracks, unseen until tragedy forces us to look. The Hello Kitty murder wasn't just about what was done to her, it was about everything that failed her along the way. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.
She just wanted to be safe, bro. What happened to her kid? What happened to Fan Manny's son? Fan Manny, my bad. Son was placed into the care of Hong Kong Social Welfare Department following her tragic murder in 1999. Reports from 2015 indicate that he was raised by foster adoptive families, had a few memories of his mother, and went on to attend university in Singapore. Do you think he was educated that he went back into it? Because how old would he be now? 20s, 30s now. So probably 30s. Wow. That story was beautifully told. Definitely subscribe on A Dark Age with Megan. But wow. That's actually so gruesome. And how it was described and everything too. Well, always watch your back. Always stay with somebody. Have a great rest of your day. Good afternoon, evening, night. Peace.